All right, everyone. Today we're going to talk about something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. All through 2025, people kept asking me, what is it that's going on with religion? Why is there such a resurgence of both a sense that religion is significant in our culture and also people talking about it, people experiencing it in new ways? Well, there are a lot of obvious things we can say about that. And there's also a lot of really obvious applications to business. So I'd like to take you through some of the things that I'm seeing. Some of the things that we've seen this last year or two are really quite surprising. After generations of monotonic decline in religious identification, especially among the young, like the younger the cohort, the less likely they are to identify as religious. This is across all Western countries, but especially in America, where religious identification has stayed higher for longer. But in 2023, 2024, it starts ticking up, and it starts ticking up specifically among like 18 to 35-year-olds, where it's been going down, 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 huge drops during the 90s and then, continued decline. And then all of a sudden you see this tick up, surprising. You also have books, Ross Douthat's book about belief, Dreher's book about enchantment, Justin Brierley's podcast about the surprising rebirth of belief in God, new atheism, sort of falling out of common currency. Obviously, there's still people who are a part of that, but it's kind of fallen out of the influence that has exercised really, since I was a kid. I would say like increased religious tenor among non-religious people. So for a long time, we've had this category of people who are spiritual but not religious, but those people are starting to sound a lot more religious. They're incorporating things into a structure of belief. They're creating practices and recurring groups of people that are coming together. We're not just talking crystals and psychedelics. We're also talking, things like community engagement. I mean, this is a huge trend right now. The push for civic renewal, for increased repeating interactions between people in physical communities or even virtual communities. I mean, these are things that are very much religious phenomenon. There's a lot of things going on, and this could be really confusing if you haven't been paying attention to what's going on. So I'd like to talk a little bit about why this is happening, why it makes perfect sense that it's happening right now, and what it means for business. Anytime you can spot a trend, then it becomes something that you can work from. It's something that you can capitalize on, that you can take the strengths of that and apply it within your business and also in the interface between your business and the rest of culture. So how do we get here? Well, humans have always been religious. Religion comes from the word religio or religio, link again. This is a Latin term, obviously. The ancient Romans said this is from legere, which is our word for to read. Ledger means to go over again carefully. And more or less, that's what a lot of people think religion is. It's like something that you do religiously, that you're super careful about following all the details and you do things, I don't know why, we just do them. That's being religious. But the early Christians said, no, it's not. That's actually the wrong word. It should be re ligare, or to link, where we get our word link, ligament. So religion is what links the different parts of ourselves together and links us together with whatever is highest, God or whatever it is we perceive as highest. So religio as re ligare, I think makes a lot of sense that this is just a part of how humans function and what humans are. Now, we get to the Enlightenment, starting in the 1500s, and we really start getting serious about thinking. We try to get more precise. We try to create these separations between different fields of knowledge, separations between individuals. So there's a rise of individualism. All fields get reductionistic, and then we try to break them into smaller pieces in order to get at the real thing. So this is very common. I think this way, you think this way. Everyone you've ever met thinks in a reductionistic manner. We think that the real thing is down at the bottom, that physics is the most real thing that there is, and chemistry is real insofar as it relies on physics, and biology starts to get a little squishy, but it's still, as long as we can connect it to the chemistry, then we're on solid ground. So again, the smallest component, the most reduced piece of what we can look at in the world, that's where reality is going to be found. We also then get these distinctions between mind and intelligence and consciousness and being and facts. And rather than always seeing all these things as kind of linked together in complicated ways, we break them apart and we think that in some way we will get at firmer knowledge through that. The illustration that always comes to me is Descartes, who is lying in his bed. I think he's sick or something, and he's in this room that has tiles. I don't know if this is true, but I picture like subway tiles alternating black and white on all four walls and on the ceiling. And so he starts to think, wait a second, any space, any spot in this room can be located just by counting the tiles from one corner to another. And anything that happens here, if I move, if a fly zooms around, that can be mapped mathematically. And so, of course, that's where we get Cartesian coordinates, which has been immensely useful. But you see what we did there. We took something that's incredibly complicated, like the movement of a human body through space, and we break it down to something that can be fixed, something that is reduced down to 3 numbers. And obviously that's been incredibly useful. That's built our modern world. That is still will always be a part of how we think. But when we take all of reality, including the human mind, the human experience, the social experience, and we try to break it down in that sort of way, what do we lose? We lose a sense of mystery. We lose a sense of meaning, because meaning is the proper relation between a bunch of different things, which cannot be reduced then to all of its smallest constituent parts or even the individual relations between the things. So I don't know if you're following me here, but I think you can see in whatever field you are, you can see the sense in which it has become reductionistic in order to become more powerful. But then there's a sacrifice of meaning and connection in order to achieve that power. So that works great as long as it keeps working. And then eventually we hit a wall and it doesn't work for us anymore. And people start to experience a lack of meaning. They get depressed. They get anxious because they are aware that their experiences and their being and their mind and their humanity is no longer held within a dense web of religio, of relinked connections. Instead, it's been all reduced out into separate fields and separate levels and separate certainties with p-values. And while some things work that way, like if you're building a bridge, things will tend to work that way. But if you're building a human life, eventually that starts to wear thin and people go looking for some way to link these things together again. That's what's happening. I don't think it's all that surprising that it comes on the heels of COVID when we took kind of the last bits of what was holding us together, and we put it on pause to try to preserve the biological life of individuals. Very logical Enlightenment thing to do. But what we found is that it kind of crushed us. It kind of broke us. And especially coming on the heels now of generations of this reductionistic thinking and kind of squeezing the last bits of faith and community and neighborhood, everything that is not individual autonomy, kind of squeezing the last bits of that out of our society, you can certainly see how eventually we hit a breaking point and things start to fall apart. And when things start to fall apart to a certain level, people will go looking. They will find something to reestablish that connection, to reorganize their life around them. Now, be very careful, because a lot of the things that they will look for are not things that you want to have being expressed in your society. And if you're an atheist or agnostic who's negative about religion in general, then you would put all religion in that category. But even if you're not, there are certain elements of nationalism and racism and other kinds of hyper identities that in a sense are religious because they do sort of create this central rallying point for the human psyche. In a sense, they're anti-religious in that they're kind of modern reduced versions of these identities that are not networked and balanced and constrained and limited by a deep set of moral commitments. Instead, you just take this one thing. I am this tribe. This can define the totality of my humanity. So again, in a sense, that is the resurgence of religion. In a sense, it is a modern anti-religion or pseudo-religion. I was just saying that to point out that not all of the things that people grab onto here are going to be positive, I think, from whatever perspective you're coming from. So that's kind of the Enlightenment story. That's how we got here. That's why the 2020s are seeing this resurgence of religious sensibilities, specifically in the sense of religare, relinking together the different parts of the human experience, reestablishing meaning. And this doesn't have to be done inside a faith community or inside a church building. If you listen to my conversation with Sam Pressler, he talks about joining a comedy club. And they're in this club, they go through this process, and they're all trying to support each other to, at the end of the process, everyone is going to be able to stand up on stage and go through a routine. And so this sense of teamwork that emerges, the bodies in a room performing rituals, doing the same activities week after week with a transcendent purpose of changing people's behaviors to align with a view of who they wish to become. That, in a sense, it evokes a bit of a transcendent experience. It pulls together, it relinks people together in a way that they maybe hadn't experienced or that is really life-giving to them. So again, this does not have to be something that happens inside a faith community. And I think that's one of the really important things as I start talking about how this applies to business, is that whatever you do in your life or in your business, that it has a relinking function. This should not be seen as in competition with, replacement of, or blind copying of something that happens within a quote unquote religion, like a world religion. Rather, it is an overflow of religio as religare, like this part of the human experience that involves kind of our best insights on what it means to be human, on the ways that we link all these parts together, and then we place constraints on them so that we aren't ending up with people who are just identifying with tribe or with their sex or something, and then taking that to the exclusion of all the parts of their humanity. So how do we apply this? Well, number one, if you're a business leader, you need to recognize that in the 2020s, the late 2020s, there's a huge premium on sense making, on meaning making. So if you can pull this off, if you can have a set of insights that when people engage with you as a leader, as people experience the internal workings of the company, and as people interact with the company, they feel that this is someone who is properly linked together, and the way that they talk about the world is balanced and coherent, then there's going to be a certain magnetism that comes with that. And you can pull that off. So pay attention to sense making, get good at it. It's going to be a huge competitive advantage for you. Second thing, trends in general. Several trends that are obvious that are within this overall umbrella of the resurgence of religion. Community engagement and civic renewal. Obviously, that's super hot right now. Again, refer back to Sam Pressler, the podcast that we did, and a bunch of great stuff that he's doing with connecting and supporting people who are supporting community engagement around the country. Another trend is I see work becoming more as an avenue for personal growth and transformation. Obviously, this has always been here, but a reductionistic approach reduces it to a transactional relationship between individuals, and it's just a job is an acceptable way of functioning. I think that's losing its cachet, and they've talked about this with millennials, but I think it makes a lot more sense to see this not only as a sort of an extreme version of individualism in the workplace, but also it makes some sense if you add this component that what people are looking for is a linking together of who they are and what they do in their work. We're still on number two, trends. That's another trend that we're looking at. A third trend is that of ideas becoming real. So when you reduce everything and break it into its smallest components, when you separate mind from facts or values from facts, you've decreased artificially what ideas can do for you. And there's pressure for these ideas to start doing more work. So there is going to be a lot of use for people who study ideas, people who articulate principles, people who learn philosophy. Ideas and symbols are becoming real in the life of companies and in the life of humans in our culture. And that is another trend that you need to watch and take advantage of. Obviously, there's a shadow side to this. You could see meme culture as sort of the nihilistic version of starting to value symbols and ideas again. But you don't have to go with the shadow version. You can create a real version of it. Again, that's an overflow of some of these insights that humans have generated over thousands of years about how we best connect the different parts of our life so that they make sense. Again, trends is just something to watch, and trends related to the resurgence of religion are going to be things that you can jump on. I'll tell you now, there will be a lot of bullshitters and grifters who try to grab onto these things and use them for nefarious purposes. You don't have to be that. You can look for how you can make positive use of them. They will be powerful and real. You know, when there's a trend that's happening in the world, it's happening on so many different layers of existence. And the forces that are pushing those influences come from so many different directions that if you're not not super reductionistic or materialistic about the way that mind work, which you obviously shouldn't be because minds are very complex, you can see how the influence from a trend is going to create a portal of opportunity that was not open before. So if you can see these trends and you can allow them to percolate in your consciousness and grab onto them and express them in coherent and positive ways, you have an opportunity that you did not have in 2023, or that you won't have if you can't see the trend and can't recognize it. So that's one of the main things I want to give you is let's use this lens of the resurgence of religio across culture, and let's use that to identify trends that then we are able to make sense of and to use in order to drive positive impact in the people around us. The third thing that I would say is that you can borrow bits of religion and they will be exceptionally useful. And I don't mean you have to like some sort of prayer circle or something. I mean, take the components of what makes up religion, beliefs or coherent narratives, practices, people gathering for a particular purpose, rituals that are real. They have to not be completely artificial. They're real in that they pull together or they refer to these other components. So if you look at these components, again, you're not replacing faith or religion and you're not imitating it, but instead you're taking the overflow of that and you're allowing it to be expressed in some of the ways that you gather people together for meals, the ways that you open your quarterly meetings the same way each time, that you tell stories from the founding of the company. All of these things, if it starts to feel a little ritualistic, a little bit like this relinking function, then you might be onto something that people are really hungry for and that has far more impact than what you would have naturally expected as a modern person. All right, so those are the three that I see. Huge premium on sense making, watch the trends in this area, and look at the components of religion and look how you can implement rituals, practices, narratives, and uniting philosophy or beliefs into your workplace. I'll probably be talking more about these, but I probably won't come back and link it into this mega theme in the future. So just keep this in mind. We're setting a very large umbrella for some of the things that we're going to be paying attention to in 2026 in order to be on the cutting edge of what is possible with coherent business. And I think this is really interesting because when you can see a mega trend like this, then you can get on board and you can make things happen. And you can see these portals of opportunity that are opening up that, as I said, they did not exist before and they won't exist forever. In a sense, they're mega themes because they tap into fundamental parts of the nature of humans and the nature of our attentional ecologies. But there are specific avenues that open up that are unique to 2026. And I want you to be able to recognize them and start to capitalize on them. So I hope that's helpful. Like I said, I'll be picking up on some of these themes and going deeper on where they are, but this gives you the overall understanding of, first of all, why this bizarre and unexpected thing and maybe negative thing, depending on your perspective, is happening in our culture. And also, what is real that's underneath that is serving a real human need that we can capitalize on and that we can use to improve what we're doing, improve our impact as business leaders.